I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, 1 week from today is a big day. It's election day. This could be a time, an election, when the Republicans take back the House, take back the Senate. It looks like it could happen in the House for sure. The Senate is still a toss-up. People are talking, people are wishing and praying from both sides. Of course, 2 years from now is another big day. That's when we get to choose a new president. And one man who would like the job is our next guest right now on Spotlight. His name is Daryl Constantine, and he is a 2024 GOP candidate for the president of the United States. Daryl, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Logan, thanks for having me as always.
Our
Appreciate it.
pleasure. Our pleasure. Now, it's a big day next Tuesday. Like I said, it's election day. What are your thoughts?
Well, certainly I want to encourage everyone watching, obviously, to go out and vote Republican. We expect to do well. And I think that it's going to be an interesting election in terms of seeing the results. I've got a little side bet with some of my boomer friends that felt that the election was stolen. I think this is kind of where the rubber is going to meet the road on that, because according to that thought line, right, the Democrats see that they're going to lose this election, so they're going to pull something to prevent that from happening. So I've got a little side bet. I'm expecting a perfectly normal midterm election, and I'm expecting Republicans to do very well. And as long as that's the case, I've sort of asked my boomer friends to maybe rethink if everything is rigged. And if everything magically turns up blue, I've promised to do more of a deep dive on the prior election. So my expectation, without getting too much into looking into a crystal ball, is I expect Republicans to do generally well, and I'm certainly very supportive and want to encourage all of your viewers to go out and vote Republican, if for no other reason for protecting the children of the nation.
Exactly. And we don't want to see any late night switches. We don't want to see the Republican candidates doing great on Tuesday night and then wake up Wednesday morning with an entirely different scenario. I think that needs to change if people are going to have confidence again in the voting system.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting, right? Because if if that occurred before, you would think that with a Democrat presidency, it would be easier for them to rig an election with Biden sitting there than Trump. So I'm curious to see how that narrative plays out. Like I said, this is kind of where the rubber will meet the road. Now, if people like Ron DeSantis, who we're expecting to win, and some of these other Republican seats, which we expect to win, if these go normally, I don't know where that leaves the narrative that it was stolen from Donald Trump. Is it all just about stopping Donald Trump? Is he the only one that matters? Or maybe is it possible that he might have just actually just lost the election? And so the mail-in ballots, the different factors that went in during that COVID cycle, we know about some of that stuff, but we'll see what happens here. Because again, like I said, if we wake up and all of a sudden it's a blue wave, then like I said, I promised to do a little bit more of a deep dive on it. But to me, peripherally, looking at the polls and the expectation of where that election was going to go, we will have to see what happens. And maybe if Donald Trump is the only one that's worth stopping, maybe we shouldn't send him again and send someone else.
Exactly. Speaking of new blood, you are new blood. You have a platform that is different than Trump's. You tend to be more moderate. You tend to look for compromise in areas where you can compromise, and you tend to hold your own in areas where you feel there is no room for compromise. So let's go through some of the issues. Hot button issues during this election cycle, and I'm sure it'll continue into 2024. Among them are crime. What do you think can be done to bring crime down to more reasonable levels?
Well, I think that really one of the big things that's happened is we've seen the same way with the feminization of our military, we've seen a feminization of law enforcement. And that needs to stop. That needs to be removed. That entire apparatus of psychoanalyzing police officers and sending a therapist with them to evaluate their preconceptions. To me, this is a topic I don't like to spend too much energy on it, because the basics is that we need to teach our officers to enforce the laws. And we need to go back to doing that instead of going back into what we're doing currently, which is again psychoanalyzing them. So that to me is kind of the simple thing, but when Democrats are in power, we know that that's actually a very difficult thing. And we've seen this feminization process. We've seen it really have such a disastrous impact on our military, which really has serious potential consequences geopolitically. And at home, the same thing has occurred with law enforcement, and it is having an impact in terms of the overall crime levels in our major cities.
Immigration is a huge problem. I've heard estimates anywhere from 2 million to 4 million people have crossed the border illegally in just the 2 years that Joe Biden has been president. I mean, that's bigger than many states, that many people. What's your
Mm-hmm.
idea on halting immigration or stopping immigration and having people come here legally as opposed to just crossing the border or overstaying their visas?
Yeah, this is very similar to me in that same topic of what we need to do is we need to enforce the border laws. And the rhetoric at this point, because this process is very far along, and the Republicans really didn't put up much of a fight for many decades, and now they have a lot of aggravation over this topic. I think that rather than apply a lot of blustering rhetoric, I think it's just as simple as enforcing the immigration laws.
The laws are there, enforce them. Exactly. Like
Yeah.
you said, we have the police forces. Let them, do their job. Don't let them arrest suspects who are then immediately released. Let's turn now to abortion. Some are saying that it's no longer a pro-choice movement. It's a pro-abortion movement when it comes to the Democrats. They seem to be very, very outspoken and very, very supportive of this issue that pales in comparison to other years and other elections. What are your thoughts on America after Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, so this is a common thing that we see with Democrats, which is whenever they change something, it gets defined as progress. So anytime they move the country in their direction, it's progress. So anytime that then it goes in a different direction, this becomes how could this possibly happen? And I think Democrats need to wake up to the reality that elections have consequences. We happen to have a Supreme Court right now that sees things the way that it does. And, myself, I'm personally pleased with the way that they handle this. And this sort of faux outrage from the Democrats over this topic, they need to come back to reality, right? And that they happen to have this perspective that everything that they do is progress. And, Republicans have maybe a different perspective. We perhaps see everything that they do as actually representing a regression, but we at least have the maturity to understand that, these things occurring, this is not something that is unforeseeable or impossible that these types of things should happen. So the matter's already done. The Supreme Court has handled it, and I believe they've handled it very well. And I would like to see them now move on and actually repeal Hodges-Obergefell and go back to restoring traditional marriage. So on this topic, yeah, we get a lot of noise from Democrats. And then with their entire apparatus, we wake up on our iPhones and we get all the news stories and the way that they're defining and the way that they're shaping things. And, it is what it is for them. They've got to deal with it. They've got to win elections and then actually, wait for changes to occur in the way that they want to see. Or if they want to start talking about things like packing the courts, I think the appropriate thing for Republicans to do is actually to talk about removing people from the court and removing seats, because we have justices on there right now that don't understand natural law. And if you don't understand natural law, to think that you can then handle topics like marriage, this to me is fundamentally incompatible with my perspective of reality. So this goes back to the mindset of where we need to be in as Republicans. We need to take all of this infrastructure, truth czars, things of this nature, and when we win elections, rather than dismantling it, we need to actually forcefully orient it in our direction and say, okay, look, all of you media outlets, all of you companies, Apple, you've decided that you're going to pick which news stories are noteworthy for the American people. And my perspective is, if you have entered into the arbiter of truth game, and if you've become somebody that has made a habit, or you've become a business rather that has made a habit of dictating what is fake news versus what is meaningful news content, and your perspective happens to magically line up 100% of the time with one of the two parties, from my perspective, you've already nationalized yourself. So the appropriate thing for Republicans to expect under a Constantine administration is that we're going to demand the same treatment from these companies. So when I'm president, if I can't tell the difference between Apple and a Biden administration, I'm going to expect them to be selecting stories and content for the American people that are consistent with my agenda and my administration. And if they don't like that, we're going to have to change things much more dramatically. Because if you were to look at this country and you were to look from the perspective of the media, you would think that everybody in this country voted Democrat. And you would think that there's absolutely nobody in the world that would possibly ever be conservative. And why would they ever do that? Because Republicans are just a bunch of idiots. Now, they are largely incompetent, but that's kind of beside the point. If you were looking from the outside and you were looking at the culture, the media, the entertainment, the whole thing, you would think that there's just one side here and everybody hates them. But there's a reality check, which is that actually no, half of the country might feel this way, but the other half doesn't. And we have to do something with this apparatus because it's creating this false illusion that this is just reality. And this is why people get so confused when things don't go their way. Like, wow, there's people that don't support abortion. This is apparently a shocking thing. People are not aware of this. Apparently, this is their first time being made aware that there's an alternate perspective. So part of it too is we have to do a better job making sure that corporate America, the entertainment industry, and that whole apparatus isn't giving people a false perception of reality, because if they actually knew that actually no, much of the country feels very differently about these things, we'd probably see a lot less outrage and a lot less confusion. So that's one of the things. I think I went off on a little tangent, but that's one of the things that as president I'll be wanting to address.
Absolutely. It seems the culture wars are now being fought in the classrooms, and a lot of parents are taking their children out of school and actually homeschooling them because of what's being taught in class. I can tell you as a parent that I would be shocked, I'd be angered, I'd be furious if they tried to have a drag queen read stories to my children or teach them about, changing genders. This is not stuff that should be taught to children. In fact, I think it borders on child abuse. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and I've been very clear on this. It is child abuse. It is sexual abuse of minors. It's how I've always defined it, and it's how I'll prosecute it accordingly as the chief executive of the country. Now, on this topic, this is a great example of, this is a situation. I agree with you. It's much better actually to keep your kids home than to send them to the public schools. And that's not a solution, right? The solution isn't that we retreat. The solution isn't that the American people have to stop shopping at stores, have to stop having cell phones, and have to stop allowing their kids to go to public schools. No, what we have to do is we have to actually thoroughly rebuke the stuff, and we have to thoroughly cast it out. And I think, as you alluded to, the best and simplest way to do that is to make it very clear this is sexual abuse of minors. And I think that that'll probably get it to stop pretty quickly. If it doesn't, by hook or by crook, we've got to drag these people out by their collars and find someone else, because I care deeply about education. But you want to talk about, investing in education, you can't give somebody $1 to abuse your children. So until this stuff has been thoroughly removed, if it means removing 90% of the professors and starting from scratch, so be it, because that's better than the status quo that we have right now. And actually, on this topic, we get into a typical response, and a typical Republican talking point and solution is, let's localize education. Let's empower the local states, the local communities, rather than the top-down executive Common Core kind of thing. And, it's certainly better than Common Core, because in some states, Florida, Texas, some of these places, you're going to have better curriculum. But to me, it's not okay to leave children in California to be abused by this curriculum. So to me, the answer is always actually to take their authority and to actually reorient it in the right direction. So I think actually what we need right now is we need a robust federal response to Common Core type curriculum. So we need from the top down, we need to be dictating very clearly. And this is where things like returning Bible study, mandatory participation in sport for young men, things like that, a lot of these things, we have to reimagine the whole thing, and we have to actually implement it across the entire country, because we have so many communities, unfortunately, where the parents, the adults running the program, they're really not fit to do it, because anybody that is in favor of these topics, and there's still time. I always tell people, history changes quick. And I know a lot of people think that they're doing the right thing. They think that they're being compassionate. They think that they're, doing something protective here. But this is not compassion. Teaching children a deviant lifestyle that does not lead to life, this is not compassion. This is abuse. And if you're compassionate, you ought to be mobilized to stand up to reject these things. So we need to do a much better job, but really it starts with a much better job of actually articulating that to the American people. And that's what the president needs to do. Beyond just speaking about these things, you have to actually mobilize. You have to say, this is what it is. This is how my Department of Justice sees it. Maybe some people see it otherwise, but we'll see you guys in court. But it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission on a topic like this, because right now we're destroying a generation of future Americans, and nothing is more important. Nothing is more important than the innocence of our children.
You struck on something interesting earlier, and that's the way the Democrats control the language. If I were to get 20 parents and just stop them on the street and say, do you want drag queens reading to your children? I guarantee you, if not 20 out of 20, 19 out of 20 would say, no way, I don't want that for my child.
That's
but
right.
If you propose something like that, they immediately call you transphobic. So they've
That's
got
right.
a hate crime type label for anyone who proposes anything that is grounded in morality, that is grounded in decency, that is grounded in family.
That's right. And this alludes to the earlier topic. They presented themselves as arbiters of morality, which traditionally corporate America didn't do that, right? Traditionally, this wasn't their job. Usually they would be reacting to the tempo, but they've asserted themselves and they have declared themselves as arbiters of morality and decency. And they did that, and they've done it apparently on the complete opposite side of everything that we've understood as being moral and decent. So to me, if you've stepped your foot out and you've done that, and you are lock and step with one of the two parties in a two-party system, you have nationalized yourself. So companies like Meta and Apple, they have nationalized themselves. So now, rather than kind of just allowing that, let's actually embrace that. And then let's actually, when we occupy the White House, let's assert our values through them. And then all of a sudden it becomes a very different topic. But that's really the only way that these companies are going to learn. And they're going to have to, because they don't get to make reality. This is where I look at republicanism, and we spend a lot of time complaining, but we're kind of missing the big picture. This is a democracy. And what democracy allows is the citizens get to make it whatever they want. So if this is how we would want it to be, then we have the complete right to do that. And they have stepped themselves forward. So now to me, it's too late. It's too late to step back and say, oh, we don't want to be involved in culture. We just want to have cell phones. It's too late for that. Look at the emojis, look at the content, look at the selective stories that they're sending you every day. And if every day it's going to be Orange Man bad when Biden is president, when Constantine is president, every day I'm going to be expecting some articles about the Clintons and stuff of that nature. So this is really, rather than retreating and protecting ourselves, it's actually, okay, you want to do this? Then let's do this. You want to nationalize yourself? You want to inject yourself into the American conversation? You actually want to lead the American conversation on these topics? Well, great. This is how it works in America. We have a democracy. So this is what we voted for. And now we're going to expect you to give our message to the American people. Because the way it looks right now, it looks like they're in bed with one of the two parties. And that's not going to fly. That's not going to fly.
Absolutely. And you make great points there. The fact that from our emojis to the story selections you find in your Apple feed to the suppression of information by big tech on social media, the corporate American mogul has an undue say in what is happening in this country and undue influence in what's happening to young people. We're coming up at the end of our break here, but let me give you a few minutes to address the American people right now. Give them your pitch, why you think you would be the best candidate for the president of the United States in 2024.
Yeah, and I appreciate it, Logan. I got a little bit hot on that topic, and I want to continue on it because The Democrats have had so many opportunities to cut the crap and lead the American people. And it's too late. They have gone too far. And now it's too late to go back to how it was before. Now we need to take this and we need to shove it back in the right direction. And I'm the only person running for president that's prepared to do that and has the plan to do that. And that's why your listeners should vote for me, because I'm the only one, when it really comes down to it, that is about more than talk. I'm about action. And there's a lot of people that are complaining about these things, and they're doing some good things, but nobody is willing to actually embrace the reality of the situation and say that the status quo, because we're not playing the same game that we were 50 years ago. The rules have changed, and the enemy has changed the rules. So we have to meet them on that front. We have to actually embrace this moment and actually move into it. That's the future of the Republican Party if we want to do more than win elections and then hand the ball right back to the Democrats 4 years later, because that's what we're looking at right now. We're looking at probably the next 2 to 4 years being a good cycle for Republicans. And you're probably going to see Republicans celebrating in the streets like they just won World War III. But the American people, you go out to your cities, you go walk the streets, you look at the state of your nation, and you tell me who's really winning. And if you want to actually do something about it, you can come with me. You can go to Constantine2024.com, because the status quo is not going to do it anymore. And that's the only reason why I'm doing this, because nobody else is.
Great vision for America. Daryl Constantine, 2024 candidate for the presidency of the United States. He seeks to be the GOP candidate and seeks that nomination as well. Daryl, thank you so much for spending some time with us here today on Spotlight and sharing your views on the American political system.
Thanks for having me, Logan. Hi, Mom. God bless your audience. Have a good one. Happy All Saints Day.
God bless you. Happy All Saints Day to you as well, my friend. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.